Welcome to the Tech Days on Factory Automation and to my keynote speech on the Cyber Resilience Act. I'm Dennis Kipker. I'm professor for cybersecurity law and research director at the Cyber Intelligence Institute in Frankfurt am Main. And I'm happy to tell you something new about the EU Cyber Resilience Act, why we need such a regulation, and why it is of such a high importance for so many manufacturers, importers, and distributors of products with digital elements. And there is really, and indeed, a long story that goes behind this Cyber Resilience Act for several years. So what's the story behind the EU Cyber Resilience Act? So over the past 10 years, networking through digital products in the IoT as well as in the industrial IoT environment, and therefore B2B and B2C sectors have increased significantly. And with the increase of the use of such a technology, the threats in the digital space are also increasing significantly, and we can see this in statistics, for example, every day, especially as products are used not only by consumers, but also by small and medium-sized enterprises, big, large industrial companies, and even critical infrastructures. And that means that cybersecurity of IoT products as well as IIoT products is getting more important than ever for every one of us. And at the same time, we have also seen that the protection of the digital supply chain has gained a high relevance and high importance as well, because more and more cyber risks are associated with that digital supply chain, and they can also be considered as highly relevant. What are the risks and elements of these risks of products with digital elements that we can find in the digital supply chain? So firstly, of course, the digital supply chain is difficult to trace for every company, because every company uses a lot of different software products, hardware products, and sometimes it's really difficult to say how long a product has been used and in which parts of the company a product has been used, and what could be results of faulty products, of cybersecurity risks going on with that product. Secondly, the companies only have a very limited scope for shaping cybersecurity in the digital supply chain, because a lot of companies, they rely on products that have placed on the market that are ready to use on one hand, but on the other hand, it is not clear how cybersecurity is reached in these products, what the manufacturer is actually doing to keep the product cyber secure, and of course, if the documentation is up to date. And the last thing is a company which is using a certain product really accessing and evaluating the documentation as part of an information security management system that is implemented in such a company. Third part is that many manufacturers have done too little for the cybersecurity of their products, their own products in the past. And that means we have, of course, a lot of cyber unsecured products in the market. And that means also that there is a high need for such a regulation, such as the Cyber Resilience Act, which makes cybersecurity of products with digital elements as an imperative for many companies that will be affected by this regulation. So what about the story behind the EU Cyber Resilience Act? So when we talk about IoT and industrial IoT, we often have thought in the past about safety of products, but not enough about the security of these products. So in the past, product-related security requirements were not comprehensively and generally regulated by any kind of special laws, or did not relate specifically to cybersecurity, but generally mostly to the safety of the products, for example. And for many years, for many decades, this was really sufficient, and we had a clear distinction between IT and OT. But today, of course, the situation has been changing, and this is why the European legislator is trying to regulate the cybersecurity issues of products with digital elements. And firstly, you had always been talking about the safety, but less the security of the products. And digitization was really not a priority at first. And this, from a legal and compliance perspective, resulted in a quite unclear understanding of product-related cybersecurity requirements. This led to some kind of fragmentation of these requirements, and of course, in the result, it lowered the cybersecurity standards for digital products. But as you can also see on the left-hand side of the slide, there's a strong interconnection and intersection between safety and security. And this connection between safety and security will be getting even stronger in the upcoming years. The first steps of harmonizing European product-related cybersecurity law was the so-called EU Cybersecurity Act. And this is, when it comes to cybersecurity regulation, a quite old law. Let's call it like this. So the EU Cybersecurity Act, CSI, was the first general technology-related regulation of cybersecurity in the European Union, and it was adopted in the year 2019 as an initial response to this shortcoming that I have described to you in the last minutes. But frankly speaking, a lot of people did not hear about the Cybersecurity Act so far, even though it had the task of regulating product-related cybersecurity. And this is due to the reason that one core element of this Cybersecurity Act is the so-called cross-product regulation of certain security-relevant technologies that are being used in a lot of different products with digital elements, such as 5G technology or cloud technology. And the cybersecurity requirements of these techniques that are being used in products with digital elements are called cybersecurity certification schemes. So based on the CSA, the European Union, and with that, the European Cybersecurity Agency, ENISA, has the duty and the task to identify cybersecurity requirements for these core technologies that I have mentioned a few seconds ago. But there have been concerns coming from the industry regarding such a legal proposal from the European Union, because the industry assumed that there would be conflicts between these cross-product cybersecurity certification schemes and existing requirements, not legal requirements, but technical requirements from decades of harmonized and standards-based European product law based on the so-called new legislative framework, the NLF. And the NLF is known because in the industry, especially in the electronics industry, this is really a baseline for any kind of security requirements for decades, because the law itself does not concretely define what cybersecurity means. This is concretely defined by technical norms and standards. So coming back to the whole legal policy and systematic background of understanding the EU Cyber Resilience Act, we'll get to the conclusion that this Cybersecurity Act, dating back to 2019, was not a sufficient approach of the European Union to create a union-wide level of cybersecurity for products with digital elements. And this is why the European Union decided to introduce a new regulation, which is called the EU Cyber Resilience Act. So the EU Cyber Resilience Act can not only be seen as a solution for the technical and cybersecurity problems that I have prescribed aforementioned, but it's also some kind of political solution to the legal difficulties we had in the product regulation for cybersecurity. So the idea of the Cyber Resilience Act is the creation of a uniform European legal basis that specifically regulates the cybersecurity of these products with digital elements. I will come later on to that term and its concrete explanation, and at the same time gives industry the opportunity to specify cybersecurity requirements through norms and technical standards. So this is in some way a slightly different approach, but it is to say that the European Cyber Resilience Act also refers to cybersecurity certification schemes according to CSA when an interpretation of these legal terms is being conducted. Regarding the further history of the EU Cyber Resilience Act, I would like to give you some information about the legal policy and systematic background of that law. So regarding the Cyber Resilience Act, the first Commission draft was presented in mid of September 2022. And this law can be considered the spider in the web. So it's not just about the Cyber Resilience Act itself. It's about the whole European ecosystem of legal cybersecurity compliance. So we have here a lot of comprehensive reference points to other European legal acts, but also to international acts regulating cybersecurity of digital products. And I have mentioned on this slide several of them, which can be considered the most important ones, such as the NIS2 directive, the Network Information Security Directive 2. I will come to that point later on as well. The Artificial Intelligence Act, because artificial intelligence is also a product-related regulation that we see here. We have the Cybersecurity Act, which I have mentioned a few minutes before. The machinery regulation, we have a new machinery law and a product security law in the European Union. And of course, the United Nations rules on cybersecurity of automated vehicles. And last but not least, the new medical devices regulation in the European Union, which is dealing with cybersecurity from a very specific point of view. Originally, it was planned regarding the Cyber Resilience Act that there would be some relatively particularly restrictive market surveillance requirements for these so-called products with digital elements that have a significant cybersecurity risk. And that you can see here on the left-hand side, because we had two classes of critical products, class 1 and class 2. And in the first version of the draft of the Cyber Resilience Act, this was really an extensive catalog. As you can see here, password managers, network interfaces, firewalls, microcontrollers, operating system, industrial firewalls, CPUs, and secure elements, etc., etc. And this was partially withdrawn or recategorized in the political legislative process. And I will come to this point later on as well. Lastly, before we dig a little bit deeper into the Cyber Resilience Act itself, I would like to give you a very short overview of what the distinction between Network Information Security Directive 2 and Cyber Resilience Act means in practice. Because currently a lot of companies are dealing with NIS2 regulation, how to implement it and how to find out which company will be affected. If there are any subcontractors that are affected by this law, and what technical and organizational measures according to NIS2 will mean. And there will be definitely companies that will be affected on one hand by NIS2 directive and on the other hand by the Cyber Resilience Act as well. And this is a result of a different approach both legislative measures are taking here. So firstly, NIS2 is a company-related cybersecurity directive. And as a directive, it has to be implemented in the European national state law to become effective. And the EU Cyber Resilience Act is a product-related regulation on cybersecurity. So the Cyber Resilience Act will be directly applicable to all companies doing business with products with digital elements in the European Union. So on one hand, NIS2 is dealing with the cybersecurity requirements of the company itself, the interior processes have to be kept secure. And on the other hand, when a company is selling products with digital elements to the market of the European Union, these products have to be cyber secure as well. And this is why even though both legal acts have different legal approaches and directions, they are going for a whole ecosystem of cybersecurity in the European Union, and that's the main approach, and that's also the idea why a lot of companies will be affected by both regulations. To give a short overview, what are the main requirements of the Cyber Resilience Act in detail? So firstly, the Cyber Resilience Act is dealing with so-called products with digital elements, and this is really a very broad definition. There are hardware products, software products, and embedded systems that will be part of the Cyber Resilience Act. Secondly, the Cyber Resilience Act firstly prescribes security by design as a main requirement. That means already software engineers, software developers have to take into account cybersecurity by design in the product design of a certain product with digital elements for the whole life cycle of the product. That means until end of life. Thirdly, the Cyber Resilience Act is dealing with risk assessment and documentation obligations. Legally speaking, when something is not documented, it has not happened, of course. But when you want to consider what are the relevant cyber security risks for your product with digital elements and what security by design means for an individual product, you have to find out what are the results of a concrete and individual risk assessment of each product with digital elements. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there are really a lot of products with digital elements that are affected here, from consumer products up to products that are used in critical infrastructure. So we have very different cybersecurity requirements which will have to be met according to the CRA. The fourth point here is the supply chain protection, including products from third countries. As we all know, nearly no product is a standalone product. Nearly every product with digital elements uses source code or hardware components that come from third-party manufacturers, maybe also from third-party vendors that come from countries outside of the European Union. And as geopolitical strategic tensions are rising, for example, there are also relevant cybersecurity questions regarding this digital supply chain that will have to be asked now and in the future. The fifth and last point regarding the overview of the requirements of the CRA is concerning mandatory security updates by default, because the Cyber Resilience Act says cybersecurity is changing. Threat vectors are changing, new attack vectors are being discovered by cybersecurity researchers, by white hat and by black hat hackers. And for this reason, this is a very innovative procedure, and that means that security of a product can change during the time it is on the market. And this is why there's a duty of manufacturers, for example, to provide security updates by default regarding the cybersecurity of their products with digital elements. What are the main definitions and what means the scope of application of understanding this EU Cyber Resilience Act? So there are some key definitions that are being mentioned in the law, which concern on one hand the scope of application, but show us on the other hand how broad the scope of application of this Cyber Resilience Act really is. So firstly, products with digital elements are defined. So this is one of the key definitions that we find here. A product with digital element is a software or hardware product and its remote data processing solutions, including software or hardware components being placed on the market separately. So coming from this broad definition, you can say we have a really big scope of application here, which considers nearly all products with digital element as relevant according to the EU Cyber Resilience Act. Then it comes to the definition of remote data processing, because nearly every tool today, digital tool and product, is using remote data processing solutions. So what does remote data processing even mean? That is data processing at a distance, the software for which is designed and developed by the manufacturer or under the responsibility of the manufacturer, and the absence of which would prevent the product with digital elements from performing one of its functions. And this is a really important definition, because a lot of IoT products, industrial IoT products, are relying on cloud computing services for the functionality. Third definition here, software and hardware. Also very broad definition. Software, the part of an electronic information system which consists of computer code. Hardware, a physical electronic information system or parts thereof capable of processing, storing, or transmitting digital data. The manufacturer, importer, and distributor, these are also relevant definitions, because these are the three entities that will be directly affected by the Cyber Resilience Act. A manufacturer is a natural or legal person who develops or manufactures products with digital elements or has products with digital elements designed, developed, or manufactured and markets them under its name or trademark, whether for payment, monetization, or free of charge. So again, a very broad definition, and you do not even have to sell your products on the market. When you offer them for free, you're part of the regulation of CRA. Importer, a natural or legal person established in the Union who places on the market a product with digital elements that bears the name or trademark of a natural or legal person established outside the Union. So we have a lot of companies that are just importing products, and they have to make sure in the future that their products that have been imported into the European market are cyber secure as well. The distributor is a natural or legal person in the supply chain, other than the manufacturer or the importer, that makes a product with digital elements available on the Union market without affecting its properties. So it's about selling these products on the European Union market. There are some requirements for these products with digital elements that have to be met, and the general rule for these requirements can be found in Article 6 of the CRA. Products with digital elements shall be made available on the market only where they meet the essential requirements set out in Annex 1, Part 1. And secondly, the process put in place by the manufacturer complies with the essential requirements set out in Annex 1, Part 2 of the CRA. And now we will take a look into these Annex 1 regulation, Part 1 and Part 2. And we'll find there very specific cybersecurity requirements. Part 1 of the Annex 1 defines essential cybersecurity requirements which have to be met for a product to be compliant to the CRA when it accesses the European market. So, products with digital elements shall be designed, developed, and produced in such a way that they ensure an appropriate level of cybersecurity based on the risks, be made available on the market without known exploitable vulnerabilities, be made available on the market with a secure by default configuration, ensure that vulnerabilities can be addressed through cybersecurity updates, ensures protection from unauthorized access by appropriate control mechanisms, including but not limited to authentication, identity or access management systems, protect the confidentiality of stored, transmitted or otherwise processed data, personal or other, such as by encrypting relevant data, protect the integrity of stored, transmitted or otherwise processed data, process only data, personal or other, that are adequate, relevant and limited to what is necessary, protect the availability of essential and basic functions also after an incident, have to implement cybersecurity by design, and provide the possibility for users securely and easily remove on a permanent basis all data and settings. Part 2 of this Annex 1 regulation, which have to be additionally considered, define vulnerability handling requirements for products with digital elements. That means that manufacturers of products with all these digital elements shall identify and document vulnerabilities and components contained in products with digital elements, address and remediate vulnerabilities without delay, including by providing cybersecurity updates, apply effective and regular tests and reviews of the security. Once a security update has been made available, share publicly and disclose information about fixed vulnerabilities, put in place and enforce a policy coordinated on vulnerability disclosure, take measures to facilitate the sharing of information about potential vulnerabilities in their product with digital elements, as well as third-party components, and provide mechanisms for securely distributing updates for products with these digital elements, as well as ensuring that where security updates are available to address identified security issues, they are disseminated without any delay. Regarding some special categories of products with digital elements, we find still some additional regulations on cybersecurity requirements. And there is a clear distinguishment between important products with digital elements and ordinary products with digital elements. And there's an annex regulation in Part 3 that we can find in the CRA, which clearly defines which products can be considered as important products with digital elements. I will not read everything that you can see here on this slide deck, as you will have the recording of this short presentation as well. But you can see here that these important products with digital elements are used in many kinds of different infrastructures up to critical infrastructure, such as password managers, network management system, security information and event management systems, public key infrastructure and digital certificate issuance software, routers, modems, intended for the connection to the internet, as well as switches, and very important for a lot of different manufacturers, smart home general purpose virtual assistants, smart home products with security functionalities, including smart door locks, security cameras, baby monitoring systems, and alarm systems, and last but not least, interconnected toys and personal wearable products to be worn or placed on the human body that have a health monitoring included, such as tracking. We have to distinguish between two different classes of important products with digital elements, and the aforementioned products are part of class 1, whereas these products here that you can see on the last slide are to be considered as products with digital elements of the class 2. So firewalls, intrusion detection and prevention systems, tamper-resistant microprocessors, and tamper-resistant microcontrollers. And lastly, there's one last category which considers so-called critical products with digital elements. This category is relatively limited to hardware devices with secure boxes, smart meter gateways, and other devices for advanced security purposes, including for secure crypto processing, as well as smart cards or similar devices, including secure elements. And when you're affected by this regulation, for example, as a manufacturer, you have to conduct the following measures. So you have to conduct a risk assessment for the design, development, manufacture, supply, and maintenance of these products. You have to take into account the digital supply chain. That means third-party components must not compromise the cybersecurity of the end product. There is a documentation obligation, declaration of conformity and consumer information, and a determination of a support period for the normal life cycle of a product, but at least of 5 years. And this has been a really broad debate in the legal procedures so far, how long the support period should be. Corrective measures in the event of missing, inadequate security, up to and including withdrawal, recall of a product, and last but not least, so-called notifications to the National Cybersecurity Authority and the European Cybersecurity Agency ENISA after becoming aware of actively exploited security vulnerabilities in your products. And as I mentioned before, these duties do not stop at the manufacturers. They also affect the importer and distributor of products with digital elements. And the legal obligations that we can find here are quite similar to the one of the manufacturers, but they are also clearly distinguished when it comes to the duties of the manufacturer, the importer, and the distributor. So for example, the importer has the task of only placing on the market the products with digital elements that have a high level of CRA conformity. There are requirements for importers comparable with the manufacturer, and some additional information obligations towards the customer, in particular the contact details of the importer. There's also the option of withdrawal recall in the event of non-compliance with the CRA of the product with digital elements, and in the event of security weaknesses of such a product, information to competent market surveillance authorities in the member states and manufacturers must be issued. The obligations of the distributors are quite comparable to the requirements of the importers with regard to conformity with the CRA, but there are also some duties of additional verification of whether the manufacturer and importer have complied with the CRA requirements before placing a product with digital elements on the European Union market. There are some sanctions and penalties for non-compliance with the rules of the Cyber Resilience Act. And in the event of inadequate action or non-action by the manufacturer, there might also, as the hardest sanction, the prohibition of a product distribution possible on the European Union market. And the EU states that the national legislators and also the national authorities in charge have to take place effective, proportionate, and dissuasive sanctions. And these sanctions are really comparable to the ones that we can find in Network Information Security Directive 2, as well as in the Cyber Resilience Act. So we have a maximum fine of 15 million euros, or if the offender is a company, up to 2.5% of its total worldwide annual turnover in the previous financial year. We have also some more grades of penalties and sanctions. For example, for minor infringements, the grading starts at 10 million euros or 5 million euros, or up to 2%, 1% of the total worldwide annual turnover achieved in the previous financial year. And there might also be multiple fines for the same infringement not excluded. So to come to a conclusion, we have seen that the Cyber Resilience Act is really an important rule. And we have also seen that there are some implementation deadlines that I have not mentioned yet. So the Cyber Resilience Act was adopted by the European Parliament on March 12, 2024. And the entry of force is planned for the second half of 2024, according to the EU Commission. And products with digital elements that were placed on the market before 36 months after entry into force of the Cyber Resilience Act are only subject to these requirements if these products are significantly modified after this date. So in principle, we can say the provisions of the CRA apply with some sector-specific exceptions that we can find in the law from the 36 months after the legal act comes into force. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very looking forward to your questions.